Being no stranger to car chases in his career come the early 80s, Steven Spielberg had already made his mark in action and vehicular carnage on screen in his made-for-television feature-length movie debut in 1971's Duel, along with the good old-fashioned police chase drama in 1974's The Sugarland Express. As it has been documented by the director himself, by the late 70s, Spielberg had made a reputation as a very talented director, yet was equally known for his going over budget and schedule issues that were starting to affect his place within the industry, not least due to his then recent failure in the 1979 high-concept comedy 1941. Starring John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, who a year later would also go on to be involved in their own Hollywood car chase adventure, 1941 was a commercial failure that would prompt Spielberg to bring his films back to basics and attempt something simple and straightforward for his next project. During a holiday in Hawaii in 1977, after the completion of both their then latest film releases, George Lucas had convinced Steven Spielberg to take on a project he wanted him to direct that would be a callback to some of the old classic adventure serials both men had grown up with. This was to be the birth of the character Indiana Jones, and the film was to be Raiders of the Lost Ark. Starring Harrison Ford and filmed in different parts across the globe, Raiders was the love letter George and Steven wanted to make to their childhoods. As stated by Lucas himself, part of the genesis for the idea of Raiders started from some of the old action truck chases he had seen in films such as Zorro Rides Again, where a transfer, as it is called in the stunt community, between two moving objects takes place, where the hero would leap off of his horse and onto a moving vehicle.
I have a lot of favorite scenes. I think my favorite, which was the inspiration for the whole series in the end, was the truck chase and him going under the truck with his whip and that whole thing, which was really where the concept of this whole thing started.
Taking place at 1 hour and 22 minutes into the film, the chase begins with our hero Indiana Jones riding on an Arabian horse as he leaves the excavation site where the fabled Ark of the Covenant was buried and found and was now being transported away by a German convoy. After a failed attempt at flying the Ark away by plane, the Nazi commanders decide to remove the Ark by truck across the Egyptian desert. It is here our hero takes on the task of stealing it back, and the chase begins. With the build-up before the scene starts, once the chase kicks into action, we are bombarded with an orchestral score by legendary composer John Williams, who Spielberg and Lucas had worked with before on their own separate projects. The score plays throughout the chase and is one of the most intricate parts of it, as it drives the pace and feeling as the scene plays out, as the music reflects the emotion and action perfectly for the audience. It was in the music of Williams that Steven Spielberg had discovered just how much a film score can immerse the viewer into the film and scene when done correctly.
We all don't want to be aware of the music, but we want to feel the music. I depend on music to help me get the audience to applaud. In this case, John Williams' music is the final planet that causes the audience to, I think, do this.
Taking place in Tunisia, filling in for Egypt, where the first installment of Star Wars, directed by Lucas, was filmed, we see Indy race across the desert and cliffs as he cuts his way through the terrain to get ahead of the convoy in order to make his interception and hijack of the truck that is carrying the Ark. Although the scene had first been storyboarded and initially planned out by Steven Spielberg, and he had already envisioned what he wanted to see and how it should play out, filming the chase itself would be left in the hands of second unit director Michael D. Moore. A veteran actor and second unit director of old Hollywood, Moore had worked as a second unit director on films such as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Patton, to name a few of the more than 90 films under his belt, until his death in 2013 at the age of 98 years old. After making his way down a cliffside, Indy is able to ride his horse along the side of the truck after evading being shot by guards following in a separate vehicle. It is here we get a glimpse of the stunt crew who are to perform in this chase. This includes Rocky Taylor, Roy Steele, Peter Diamond, Chuck Waters, and Sergio Mironi, along with several others. Once he makes his way into the truck's cabin and removes its passenger, we see stuntman Terry Leonard behind the wheel as Indy fights his way to gain control of the lorry. Along with Vic Armstrong, who had been Harrison Ford's stunt double for a number of scenes and in other films later, Terry was to be the man who would double for Harrison in one of the scene's most dangerous stunts that was to soon take place in the chase towards its conclusion. As the struggle continues in the truck, resulting in some frantic action that leads to one of the truck's passengers to fall out of its rear, we hear the now infamous Wilhelm scream, made popular by sound designer Ben Burtt, who had worked with George Lucas before in the previous 2 Star Wars installments and would become a continued collaborator with both famed directors. This would become a continued running gag in Burtt's career, when he would work with Spielberg and Lucas and in further installments of this franchise and include this scream when needed. We see a mistake take place as the railing above the roof of the truck's cabin breaks away, yet would later be seen intact as it would be used as leverage for a later stunt. The tone of the score changes as it will continue to do so throughout the chase, as we now hear the Raiders B theme kick in a more aggressive tone when Indy takes control of the truck. Based on a World War II German Mercedes-Benz LG 3000, the truck driven in this chase was in fact a modified 1941 GMC CCKW 353 supplied by the founder of the Le Mans Military Vehicle Museum, Charlie Mann, who built the truck and several others in England to replicate the German vehicles needed for the film. The CCKW 353 was a 6x6 and originally powered by a GMC 270 straight-six petrol engine when first built, and had a range between 104 and 133 horsepower and a top speed of 45 miles per hour. With Indy now full control of the lorry, he attempts to ram off the road the heads of the Nazi group who are fleeing in a 1937 Mercedes-Benz 320 Lang replica driven by stuntman Rocky Taylor. Built on a 1960 Jaguar Mark 9 chassis, the 320 replica has been said to be powered by a 285 horsepower Jaguar engine and was capable of reaching 120 miles per hour for the chase scene and able to accelerate 0 to 60 miles per hour in 11.3 seconds. The next vehicle that is used in this chase is another custom replica Mercedes-Benz G5 built on a Dodge WC chassis. The most powerful version of this model used is said to be between 78 and 92 horsepower, 3.6 cylinder gasoline engine and a max speed of 55 miles per hour. As the chase continues, sound designer Ben Burt once again adds his unique style into the film, where we hear the sound of a lion's roar used as Indy rams the truck into the German escort vehicle. The last vehicle to show up in this chase that is quickly disposed of is a Ukrainian 650 Nipro MT-10 motorcycle with sidecar that was made in the Soviet Union in the 1970s. Like the other vehicles made to look as chronologically correct as possible for the time with exceptions, as the film is set in 1936, yet a number of the vehicles are made reflecting 1937 plus World War II counterparts. The Nipro MT-10 was developed in 1974 and was used as a stand-in for the 1938 German-built BMW R71. This was in fact the model the Nipro was originally based on when first developed, as it used the BMW World War II motorcycle as one of its main inspirations. In a final attempt, the G5 replica is seen trying to shoot Indy by driving alongside the truck's driver's side door, but is rammed off the road once again, only this time the vehicle and its passengers are forced off the side of a cliff. It is at this point in the chase that the passengers at the back of the hijacked truck finally decide to make their assault to regain control of it. In a display of some great stunt work, the German soldiers who have latched themselves onto the side of the canopy are forced off as Indy drives the truck into some surrounding foliage. With the canopy of the carriage now partly ripped off due to the falling of one of the soldiers, another soldier is quickly able to make his way along the passenger side door of the truck without being detected and shoot Indiana Jones in the arm before he has time to react to avoid being hit. In a sudden shift in tone, now that Indy has been wounded and appears to be in serious danger, John Williams' score changes to a much darker mood marching style motif, suggesting that the Nazis are now gaining the advantage in the chase and our hero is on the verge of failing his mission. Blood is now seen splattered over the window, and we see Indy kick the passenger door again as he is doing all he can to get rid of the threat of the German soldier while trying to maintain control of the cargo truck. With the passenger door coming off its hinges, we see stunt performer Chuck Waters dragged alongside the moving vehicle as his legs slide in and out from under the truck, adding to the realism and danger this scene presents. After finally breaking off, the door and the soldier are seen on the side of the road, and only one German officer is left on the truck along with Indy. Opting instead to make his assault from the roof, we see the soldier make his way onto the cab. Using the now intact railings found on the top of the cab, the German soldier is able to swing feet first from the driver's side window into the front seat, kicking Indy out of the way while doing so. This stunt was performed by Italian actor stuntman Sergio Mione, who had worked on several American feature films prior to his work on Raiders, such as The Black Stallion and Popeye. Mione would unfortunately pass away a few years later in 1987 at the age of 56. With Indy no longer in control, the score changes pace once more as horns begin to feature heavily, adding an even darker tone as Indy is now seen at his most vulnerable as the camera cuts in and focuses on his arm as he is continuously being punched into his gunshot wound. Indy is then thrown through the windscreen of the truck and over the hood towards the camera. In a matter of frames, we are able to see that the driver of the truck is no longer Sergio, but has now been replaced by stunt coordinator Glenn Randall. It is also here that we get to see the most dangerous part of the chase kick in as stunt performer Terry Leonard stands in for Harrison Ford. One of Terry's requests to perform these stunts were that Glenn, who he and Terry had a working history together, would take over driving responsibilities for this part of the chase and stunt. In a clever use of editing, we now see Harrison Ford once again perform part of the stunt before Terry completes it and falls onto the front of the truck where he struggles to stay on without falling under it. Attaching himself to the front wheel guard, Indy is unable to move as he is holding on for his life. Having Harrison perform a number of these shots in order to get a reaction scene on his face, several precautions were used to strap him onto the front of the truck. With the request for the driver to bring the truck closer to the Nazi officers, the score picks up pace, mimicking the speed of the truck as it too begins to accelerate. With Terry Leonard now taking over as Indy once again, he is still taking into account the stunt he performed earlier that year on the then flop The Legend of the Lone Ranger, where in a similar stunt, Leonard found himself under the wheels of a stagecoach and suffered severe injuries after the stunt went wrong and Terry first got trampled on by horses leading the carriage he was sliding towards and then being run over by the carriage wheel itself. Needing to be airlifted to hospital, there was no opportunity for a second take to be filmed, and the accident is shown in its entirety in the movie as it was the only take available for the scene. The incident was so painful and shocking, Leonard actually thought his leg had been amputated as a result of this mishap.
The competition as it exists today between stuntmen and between production companies that get spectacular action, your adrenaline's pumping all the time, but maybe 10, 12 times a year you're looking at something that could really catch a hold of you.
In order for Terry to perform the stunt now on Raiders, with the truck in motion and himself sliding under it, the suspension of the truck was lifted and a trench was built in the middle of the road in order to give Leonard better clearance for greater safety. With Indy now seen dragging behind the truck, using his bullwhip to keep himself attached, the score changes pace and tone again, with Leonard shown doing the initial part of the stunt of falling back and jerked forward. The camera then cuts in close on Harrison Ford, who is now seen also performing the stunt, with protective gear placed under him as he pulls himself up along the whip to reach the back of the carriage. Making his way back onto the truck, Indy is able to use the same hole in the canopy to enter the cab via the passenger side door as was attempted earlier. With the cab made up to be placed on the back of a camera truck, Harrison Ford is able to perform the stunt of jumping in from the side of the truck and kicking the German soldier and quickly placing himself behind the driver's wheel. Another exchange takes place between Indy and the soldier, as Indy is able to overpower him this time and in a similar fashion as done to him, is able to throw the soldier onto the front grille of the truck. A special rig was added to extend the lower front of the grille in order for the stunt performer to land on and for the actor to rest on while they did the stunt. This time, however, the soldier is not as lucky as Indy and breaks off a piece of the grille that had been damaged before, and the soldier is run over by the truck's tires. Having the scene cut to an angle of the stunt performer placed between the truck and the camera, and the full effect of the scene abstracted by a dirt mound in the foreground, made for a convincing and violent death scene caught on film. In an aggressive manner, and with the Raiders beat theme making a stronger comeback now that Indy is back in control, the truck is seen picking up speed and closing the gap between itself and the Mercedes 320 replica. Making its way alongside the convertible, Indy rams the truck into it and causing the car to veer off the side of the road. With Indy now successful, he is able to reflect on his pain, and we are reminded once more what the chase's purpose was as a quick cut of the arc on the back of the truck is seen. Having now gained enough distance, Indiana Jones and the truck have made their way into a town square where they are quickly hidden from view behind a market stall placed by locals who are aiding Indy in his attempt to recover the ark. Eventually catching up, yet not able to find the location of the truck, and with the character of Tote played by Ronald Lacey unexplainably missing with a dummy standing in for him, the Nazi officers and the character of Belloc give up their pursuit and drive off, ending the chase and the scene. Raiders of the Lost Ark was released on June 14, 1981 and would go on to gross $390 million worldwide on an $18 million budget, and was the highest grossing film of that year and was well praised among critics and moviegoers who enjoyed the film's story, harkening back to a time of adventure and heroism. With the failure that was 1941, which had harmed his still growing popularity, Steven Spielberg had reached a point in his career where he needed a hit and broke into the 80s with Raiders that not only saved his reputation but would allow him to follow up with his next success that would cement his status as one of the greatest financially successful directors of all time. George Lucas would also continue to produce box office hits and create further installments of his Star Wars franchise. The Indiana Jones series would continue with 3 further sequels and a 4th one set to be in the works. Lasting 7 minutes and 33 seconds, shot on 35mm using Panavision cameras and released on 235:1 aspect ratio, the chase took over 5 weeks to shoot, 3 days of which took to film the stunt of going under the truck. The chase sequence proved to be a highlight in an already amazing feature, with film critic Roger Ebert quoting it as having the best chase he had ever seen in a movie up to that point. 1981 proved to be a great year for action car chases, as another truck chase scene was filmed and released in George Miller's Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior, featuring its own great stunt work and helping set a new standard in high-speed road action along with Raiders of the Lost Ark. Shot as fast as a pace the desert road and the vehicles would allow, some of the filming in Raiders of the Lost Ark was done in 20 frames per second in order to help speed up a number of the slower moments that needed to be shot in a much more controllable momentum given the dangers involved to those performing the stunts required. With over 50 stunts and 13 stuntmen used, the ambition of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to bring the excitement of the old serials they grew up on had become realized and paid off on screen. However, it is also needed to be noted that an already exciting scene had been made greater with an inclusion of one of composer John Williams' best scores that helped highlight the tension and adventure that would help him get nominated for an Oscar the following year, along with Best Director and Picture for Raiders of the Lost Ark, yet did not win for those categories. Raiders did go on to win 4 Academy Awards, however, for Best Sound and Film Editing, including effects, and a Special Achievement Award for Ben Burt and Richard L. Anderson for sound effects editing. As for the vehicles, though not all of them were accurate to the year the film was set, they were eventually repaired and returned to those who built them. Renowned Jaguar restorer Craig Hinton had originally been commissioned to build the Mercedes-Benz 320 Lang replicas, which were returned to him after production had ended. A surviving replica found its way onto eBay over a decade ago with a reserve price of $2.5 million. It did not sell, however, and was later valued at an auction house at over $60,000, as its value as a film vehicle was not highly considered due to its low-key presence in the film and due to its custom status. For the truck driven by Indiana Jones, however, it had been given back to Charlie Mann when filming was completed and would go on to feature alongside other military transport vehicles at the Le Manville Military Vehicle Museum in Cornwall, UK, which was owned by Mann. There it stayed until the museum would eventually close with the passing of Mann in the late 80s, and his collection was split up and sold to different collectors. It was said that 3 trucks were initially built to be used for the film, and it, along with several other vehicles, would later appear in the 1984 war comedy Top Secret starring Val Kilmer. One of the LG 3000 replicas, complete with mounted flagpoles that had been cupped with golf balls added to assist the stunt performers while filming, found its way at the entrance queue of the Indiana Jones Adventure Temple of the Forbidden Eye ride at Disneyland, California, and is still there to this day. The truck would also feature in the original 80s Kenner Adventure of Indiana Jones toy line, and would also be later released along with the troop vehicle in the 2008 Hasbro toy line, and the artwork of the chase sequence would show up on the cover of board games due to the popularity of this chase scene. Although displayed on the grille while filming to list the engine as being diesel-powered and reflected as such in its sound design, it is not fully known if the engine used in the movie was a diesel alternative replaced in pre-production, as the GMC CCKW 353 was originally a petrol-based truck that would have its engine usually replaced post-World War II by collectors to diesel due to its high fuel consumption. Often mentioned when referred to in its popularity and standout moments of the film, and within the franchise as a whole, the desert chase sequence from Raiders of the Lost Ark is fondly remembered and was a great addition to help kick off the movie car chase for the 1980s, and remains just as impressive as when it was first released onto the big screen in the summer of 1981.